What's going on, my trainer club? Today we're gonna check out Go Battle League, and when you switch, if your Pokemon is going to be really strong but really vulnerable at the same time, what is the best case scenario for you to do to make sure that you can get closer to rank 10? So welcome to the trainer club, here we go! Welcome back, everybody. Let me know in the comments below, how are you doing on this season, the first season of the Go Battle League? Have you gotten yourself a shiny Cobalion? And let me know your wins. So today we're gonna get into the Go Battle League as far as when you're going to switch when you're at a disadvantage starting off, and then making sure to protect a Pokemon that could be very strong towards the end. So let's do it right now. I know a lot of you guys out there are potentially playing with some pretty meta teams. However, there are definitely some people that pull in some Pokemon, especially as you get into the higher levels, that are gonna be quite dangerous to your team, especially if you're running something like a Registeel and you're also running a Skarmory, because that team is extremely weak to fire. So today we're gonna check out when is the best time to switch, because I have a couple examples that we're gonna go over that are going to elicit what happens when you switch potentially too early, especially when you're using something like I am, which is gonna be a shift tree. So as far as the team that I'm mostly running throughout, I do swap out a Pokemon. I'm running a Charizard up front, with obviously Dragon Claw and the Blast Burn combination. In the second Pokemon, I'm gonna be running a Shift Tree. And then in the third Pokemon, I'm gonna be running an Azumarill with Ice Beam and Play Rough. So another time, in a couple days, we're gonna go over my complete team, because I think that this team is really, really powerful. But if you guys do wanna check out some of the weaknesses, I'm just gonna highlight that the Charizard's double weak to Rock, the Shift Tree has a lot of weaknesses, it's gonna be double weak to Bug, and the Azumarill is my pretty tanky, safer switch. So today we're gonna go over making sure to not take out a vulnerable Pokemon and switch too early, and really trying to judge your switches, because oftentimes, and I've seen this, like somebody will be coming in, and we'll go over it in a second, I'll have a Charizard up front, then they may switch to an Azumarill, and the first instinct that we may have, especially having a Shift Tree or a Venusaur, is gonna be switch into that Pokemon. And the problem with that in this case scenario, number one, Azumarill can have Ice Beam, which is going to be strong against the grass Pokemon. And number two, in order to beat this entire Pokemon, you're gonna have to eat some shields. So what I'm gonna elicit today is potentially using your safe switch that's going to be more of a mirror match, potentially, for this case scenario, instead of going in and blowing one of your really powerful counters, if that's gonna be the best case scenario for you. So we're gonna check this out right now. All right, matchup number one, we have the Charizard, and it's going to be leading into a Quagsire. Quagsire is gonna have Water Gun, so that is definitely not the matchup. And I immediately switch into my Shift Tree. However, they still have their switch. So in this case scenario, it's putting me at a vulnerable place, because this Altaria, using its flying type abilities, is gonna be super strong against my Shift Tree. And right now I'm just trying to pump out Leaf Blades. However, the more effective option would be to go all the way for the Dark Pulse, because it definitely hits the Altaria harder, like you're gonna notice here. And it's kind of been fun getting used to these Pokemon. And that's the one thing that we talked about in our other video when I was doing it with Justin, was you really have to get used to your team, right? So we're going after this Pokemon, and then that Pokemon, which could have been really effective against Quagsire, is not gonna be available anymore. So now we have to bring out the Azumarill, which is pretty effective. It takes those Sky attacks pretty easily. And I don't want any damage getting done to this Azumarill, because I've already lost my Shift Tree. So I'm trying to build up energy here, and then boom, we have this Alolan Ninetales come in, which I'm going to switch into my Charizard. And the reason why I do that is because obviously it just got switched into, and it's kind of locked in there, for one. And for two, Charizard does an amazing job against especially semi-glacier Pokemon. And I go ahead and I throw a Dragon Claw right there just to make sure. The cool thing about Charizard is it does get Dragon Claw, and so I'm able to have stored up energy on this Charizard. However, he makes a really, really intelligent play here, and I go ahead and I throw a Blast Burn at a pretty much dead Pokemon already, which was really, really smart. You have to be very careful about that. If I was thinking properly and I wasn't in the heat of the moment, I definitely would have gone for the Dragon Claw, which would then had stored up energy going in here. And unfortunately, I have no shields left, and I'm hit with this case scenario where I get earthquaked and I go straight down. So in this scenario, if I were to pause right up front and I would have thought, okay, we have a Quagsire right here. What are the Quagsire's movesets? Quagsire can get Stone Edge, it can get Earthquake, it can get Acid Spray, as well as Sludge Bomb. So fortunately, it doesn't get any water moves as far as the charge move. However, I didn't know that. And number two, with the water gun, it definitely hits that fire pretty hard. So I went ahead and switched. The one thing about the Quagsire is it's gonna be double weak to grass. So if I would have played my cards properly and maybe potentially switched into the Azumarill, I would have had a better chance. Even though that Altaria was still in there, I would much rather have the Charizard go against the Altaria with the Dragon Claw and have the Azumarill up against the Quagsire, because then potentially we would go for a mirror match, or maybe they would potentially switch. So it's really hard to say what that case scenario would be, but losing that lead and then switching right away was really not in my best interest. So now let's check out one that does work in my best interest. All right, Milholland 12, shout out. Thanks for the battles, man. It's always a pleasure battling against all these trainers, and hopefully one day, you know, playing with them in person as well. So we have a Licky coming up front, and this is a Pokemon that I'm not typically used to fighting. So I go ahead and I'm just going to play it safe and not shield on this because it has Body Slam. So I knew that was coming. However, it did a decent amount of damage, so it did definitely make me nervous right there. So I'm going with the Blast Burn. Blast Burn's a very powerful move, and he decides to shield. So if he throws a Body Slam at me again, I'm gonna go ahead and shield this with the potential that it's either gonna burn one of his shields or it's going to KO him out. So I get the Blast Burn saved up right before I'm about to go out, and we're gonna see what happens to this Licky when it gets Blast Burned, which it totally KOs it, which is really one of the positives here. So now, pause, right? So this case scenario, I stayed in with my lead, and now I see a Swampert come out that's going to be water and ground, which is gonna be weak, really weak to grass. So I'm going to head and throw in my Shiftry, but I have my switch still, so they see that. And then here comes the Registeel. However, I'm gonna overpower this Shiftry, and then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna bring in my Azumarill for the Registeel, because Registeel gets Focus Blast, which is going to demolish my Shiftry, and I don't wanna blow all my shields. So here's this case scenario where we're basically going tank versus tank, just working on getting as much of its shields down as possible, because I do have that overpowered Shiftry in the back, which we do know about, and we're 2v2 right now. He just used his last shield, which in his best interest may have been effective if he would have saved that for the Swampert, because Swampert is extra weak. But here we go. We're just gonna basically take this Pokemon as far down as we possibly can, if we can get it, and we're gonna save a shield as well, because having shields is always beneficial. You always want to have shields as much as possible, and this Focus Blast doesn't do too much damage for the Azumarill, so we're just hammering this thing down all the way. We're able to get off one more Ice Beam. The negative here is that it could potentially have some stored up energy pretty close to getting us, so we have to be very careful here, because here comes the Swampert. But the good thing is that they don't have any shields. So check out what happens when you properly stored up the energy on the Shiftry, go into that Swampert, that's a one-hit KO, and then since I was able to save up that energy, I have enough right here for this Registeel so it goes down. So that definitely went more in my case scenario. Granted, potentially that Charizard would have been a better matchup for the Registeel, because it melts Registeel, especially when you're able to save up some energy in that Charizard and then go into that Registeel. It's super effective. And next we have T-Mac233, big shout out again. So T-Mac brings in a Toxicroak. Toxicroak is another glassy Pokemon, however, the counter hits very hard. As you notice, look at my Charizard's health going down, and it's even able to beat me, and I know it has Mud Bomb, so I'm not gonna shield because that move charges extremely fast. Does a little bit of damage, but not too much. But I know that the Toxicroak is very weak in this case scenario, so in order for him to keep this thing alive, he's definitely gonna have to use some shields, and so I am fortunately able to beat him to a Dragon Claw. The Dragon Claw definitely goes off very quick, and boom, he shields again. So now he's got 2 shields down, but my Charizard goes out, so that's potentially a problem for me. And in this case scenario, I happen to throw the Shiftry, which slightly works out to my benefit at one point, but the downside is that fighting is gonna be strong against the Dark. So that was not the best case scenario for myself, but the better case scenario is that this Umbreon is gonna be weak to Fairy, and Dark Pulse barely even touches the Azumarill. So I'm able to store up some energy here on this Pokemon. I'm able to just keep going after it, and I'm not gonna shield. I'm gonna keep 2 shields in the back pocket just to be safe, because I don't know what his third Pokemon is going to be here. And I really just wanna kill this Pokemon, but sometimes you really wanna wait, right? Like, that's really the patience game, and when you start settling into your team and you just know what's most effective for you, that's really when it starts going, because he has 3 Pokemon. So I was able to save up some energy, And now I'm gonna use Ice Beam because this Pokemon's almost dead. And so I'm able to basically chunk it down with just a lesser powered move. And now we see the Lapras come in. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch to the Shift Tree. The positive about this one is that I was able to store up a little bit of energy on that other Pokemon. So this one really worked out to my favor, even though I didn't foresee him switching out. Like, that was really crazy because just sitting there with that Pokemon and doing a couple counters on me really would have done a number. And plus now I have 2 shields. I haven't shielded anything yet, which is extremely positive because that Mud Bomb is really effective against some Pokemon, but these Pokemon are not super affected by the Mud Bomb, which is pretty effective. But that counter definitely does a lot of damage. And then we're gonna go ahead and be able to KO him right off the bat. So that is going to be another battle. And in the final battle, we have Mochi. And this is going to be a Charizard against a semi-favorable, semi-not favorable. The not favorable part is the moveset that this Pokemon gets. It's able to get Rock Slide, which we already talked about, that Charizard's gonna be double weak to Rock. So we need to be careful here. We definitely need to shield. However, like that Pokemon gets hit very hard by the Blast Burn because it's neutral damage. It's not gonna resist it. So this one's gonna use Thunderbolt, which also is effective against the Charizard. Not quite as effective, but they may not have a second charge move on that Pokemon unlocked because it's super expensive. So now we have this Pokemon, and unfortunately, I wasn't thinking. The Azumarill is so resistant to the Dragon Claw that it is crazy. So now I go ahead and I throw in a Shift Tree. And so the Shift Tree is going to be weak to ice, it's going to be weak to fairy. So we need all of our shields and they need their shields as well. And we only have 1 shield. So we are not sitting in the best case scenario right here. And it has Ice Beam, which charges the fastest. And here comes the Skarmory. The Skarmory, if you're going to go against a Skarmory with a Shift Tree, you need to use the Dark Pulse. Does a lot more damage. Grass basically non-effective against the Skarmory. So I don't know if he anticipated that happening, but now I saw this one charge up and I was hoping to pull another shield and I did not. So that was the goal right there with that quick move. I definitely could have saved up and probably hit it out, and we're actually using Frostlass right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring in this Charizard, and they still have 1 shield left. So we have the Azumarill coming in. Blast Burn, even though the Azumarill is gonna resist it, still hits it relatively decently hard for being a resisted Pokemon. And now they have 1 shield and a basically fully charged Azumarill, which is slightly problematic, even though we have the Frostlass in here, which is going to resist the Ice Beam. But a shield on an Azumarill is pretty deadly. So I probably could have gone with the Shadow Ball in that case scenario. However, I was hoping to bait a shield, which I do. And then the goal for me is to basically get to that Shadow Ball. And I was 1 press away from it and they got it. So there is potential that I could have won that match. They actually went for the Hydro Pump on that particular one. And so Frostlass, really fun Pokemon to play with. However, it's definitely glassy. So I hope this helped, guys. I just really want to hammer home that make sure to switch. When you do switch, know that that Pokemon could be very vulnerable. That's the biggest case scenario. It's like, especially for me, I run a Charizard up front. So I'm either winning really hard or I'm losing probably pretty hard. And there's not really case scenarios where they're both, because some people stack their Registeels or their Skarmorys up front, and then other times they're stacked up in the back, which I could have used my Charizard for, but I'd rather have a safe switch tank to be able to get me through the match, and then hopefully store some energy on that Charizard and come back if I need to. So make sure to take that into account. Make sure to think before you switch and make sure to be the best trainer you can be. And on our next Go Battle League video, we are going to check out my complete team so you guys can see this team in effect and really battle at its full potential, because I really enjoy battling with this team, especially with the Azumarill with the unique movesets. So I thank you guys for tuning in, all my likers, commenters, subscribers, Patreon members, and everybody who takes their subscriptions and support to the next level. I'm gonna see you guys out on the next video. I just want to take a moment and sincerely thank all of my Patreon members, everybody that has taken their subscription to the next level and chosen to support me on this platform. I greatly appreciate you guys. As a growing channel and really trying to grow and improve as much as I possibly can, I really appreciate the extra support. You guys mean the absolute world to me. I cannot wait to connect with you soon, and I appreciate you guys all for being a part of the Trainer Club. I will see you guys out on the next video.